This is the Retirement Mentality channel. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. And if you're returning, hopefully that means you found the previous content useful and you came back to see some more of it. We're going to talk a little bit more about Puerto Rico today, but in general, this channel is a place where we want to change your mentality about retirement. We talk about real estate investing, we talk about personal finance, we talk about reaching financial independence, financial freedom, and a little bit about the FIRE movement. So if those are things that are of interest to you, you're in the right spot. Welcome to the channel. My Puerto Rico videos have by far been some of my most popular, and investing in Puerto Rico is a hot topic right now. I own a house in Puerto Rico. I'll link to it up here if you want to see the house that I own in Puerto Rico. But I want to talk a little bit about what would happen if Puerto Rico becomes a state. This is a hot topic right now as well. They just had a referendum in Puerto Rico. They voted on it. The people of Puerto Rico voted that they did want to become a state. Not a lot of people voted and not a lot of people participated in the vote. So there's still a lot of debate in Puerto Rico whether statehood is a good idea or a bad idea. I am not here to discuss whether I think it's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm not here to say the left is right, the right is right, the left is wrong, the right is wrong. This is not a political commentary. I strictly want to talk about what could happen to real estate and real estate investing and real estate prices if Puerto Rico were to become a state. I think that's something important for people who are considering buying in Puerto Rico, whether you're in Puerto Rico, whether you're Puerto Rican, whether you're from some other place on the planet. Whether Puerto Rico becomes part of the United States definitely will affect how real estate transactions are priced. Supply and demand, all kinds of things in the real estate market. So this is just going to be kind of a discussion, my thoughts on the matter, and I would love for people to chime in. Those of you who are part of the channel or new members, be sure to leave comments down below. Let's talk about it. Don't just tell me that I'm stupid. Sometimes that happens. But let's make this a conversation. Let's see if we can learn from each other. I'll tell you what I think, and let's get into it right now. Okay, I think the biggest and most obvious thing if Puerto Rico becomes a state is the tax incentives for people to move to the island, especially from the mainland U.S., are going to go away. They're going to be grandfathered in for a while. They have Act 60, which many people may know better as Act 20 and Act 22. They combined those into Act 60. I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into the ins and out of Act 60. That could be a discussion for another time, or you can simply Google it. This is the very simple version of it. If you bring a business to Puerto Rico and you have a minimum of 5 employees, you live in Puerto Rico, you meet the qualifications of being a Puerto Rico citizen, basically you have to live there for 6 months, have 5 employees, you get a 4% corporate tax rate. That's the very simple version. And then the other one, I'm not sure which one was which between 20 and 22, but the other one is for basically investors. If you're into crypto, if you're into stocks, if you're a day trader, trading currencies, Forex, any of those type of things, you pay 0 capital gains on your trades if you meet those same requirements and you're a Puerto Rico citizen 6 months out of the year and you meet whatever the qualifications are for that. So in a nutshell, that's what those two things are. 4% corporate tax rate for bringing a business to the island and 0 capital gains for investors. So a lot of people did take advantage of this, and a lot of people did move to the island. They're going to be grandfathered in. Bill Clinton actually is the one who wanted to try to phase that out and put a 10-year limit on some of those things. So depending on when you got in and how long you've been doing it, you'll be grandfathered in for a while, but those things will definitely go away if Puerto Rico becomes a state. The only reason they can have those is because they don't have to follow mainland USA tax laws because they don't pay federal income tax in Puerto Rico. Okay, enough of a lesson about Act 60. If you are interested in buying property in Puerto Rico, you may already know about that. So how will that affect real estate in Puerto Rico? Well, if those investors stop coming to Puerto Rico, the high-end markets, because that's mostly these were wealthy investors, a lot of them, they did get some flack from Puerto Rico, from the local Puerto Rican citizens that they were just coming there to hide tax money and they didn't want these rich Americans. It's funny, well, I'm not going to get into that discussion. Anyway, so places like Condado, Dorado, Palmas del Mar, these are a lot of the places where these people were coming to. So the high-end markets that these people were buying houses in could see a lot of a lot more demand coming onto the market, because if people aren't coming to buy those properties and people start to see those tax benefits go away, you know, there's a lot of things in Puerto Rico that are harder than living in mainland United States. Things like electricity, roads, not just the supply of electricity, but the consistency of electricity. The power tends to go out. It's expensive. Bad roads. There's many things. The bureaucratic system in Puerto Rico is more difficult. So a lot of people are willing to make some of those sacrifices for those tax incentives that they came for. Puerto Rico is a beautiful place. There are many reasons to move to Puerto Rico. I'm not making this about anything else other than the facts that we're talking about with change in statehood in relation to Puerto Rico. So don't everybody jump on me. So we could see higher demand in the higher priced markets, A, from people leaving, and B, from people not coming into those communities anymore. So that could actually drive prices down in those communities. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying that is one thing that could happen. As far as commercial properties, you could see the exact same thing. With just wealthy people coming to the island, a lot of those were the crypto guys and the day traders coming to move to the island to pay the zero capital gains. But the people who were coming there to bring their businesses there, there's a lot of consulting businesses, marketing businesses where they don't physically need to be in the U.S. and they were bringing those businesses to Puerto Rico. They may have had 10 or 20 or 30 employees, and they may have had office space. And so office space was already getting, it's been struggling in Puerto Rico because there's not a ton of those people coming, but there were people coming for those purposes. Now you add COVID on top of that, that's going to continue to crush the commercial real estate market anywhere on the planet. Now you add on top of that the tax incentives to bringing in new business to the island. That's kind of like just strike three on commercial property in Puerto Rico. So I could see that affecting commercial property as well. If people aren't bringing businesses, they don't need more office space or warehouse space or retail space. So that's one more strike against commercial property in Puerto Rico too, if they do become a state. The multifamily real estate market in Puerto Rico, it's not a big sector there. You don't have a lot of big apartment buildings like you do in the US. Like where I live in Florida, they're building a bunch of new big apartment buildings, and the commercial real estate, commercial multifamily real estate is doing really well there because there's not a lot of affordable homes. I don't see a lot of affordable housing really being a problem in Puerto Rico. I do hear some people on the internet forums complaining that there's not a lot of affordable housing, but when I look in sort of the outlying areas, I see it in the denser areas, in San Juan and stuff, the prices have gone up, and it is hard to find affordable housing in some of those places, but you can get, a 20-30 minute drive outside of the metro areas and find very affordable housing. You're just going to have to get a little bit farther outside of the main metro areas, but I don't see a lot of big apartment complexes. So that's not really an issue. So then you want to get into more of the traditional 2 to 4 unit multifamily that the individual investor is going to be more into, which people watching this are probably more interested in, not the big apartment buildings. So in the 2 to 4 family market, I haven't seen a lot of opportunities in that market anyways. For an investor like myself, I see that as a good entry point for lower income investors or local Puerto Ricans who can live close to the property. And I didn't say low income Puerto Ricans. I said low income investors or local Puerto Ricans, just to be clear, that can live close to the property and manage the property themselves. For someone like me that I already have 7 properties, I'm not looking to buy a $200,000 fourplex with rents in the $400 per month range. That's 4 toilets. It could be 27 split AC units if you had AC units in there, and 4 refrigerators and 4 stoves and 4 washing machines and 4 dryers and 400 pipes that can break. For that price point, I'm not looking, there's not enough meat on the bone for somebody in that kind of a market. So for investors coming into Puerto Rico, I don't think those are the things they're going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at the higher priced single family homes, or beachfront condos or beachfront properties that they could maybe short-term rent. So I don't think that the statehood thing will have a big effect on those lower priced 2 to 4 unit properties. So I think they'll probably stay status quo. Okay, so single family residences, that's sort of my bread and butter. That's where I like to be in my investing. That's where I am. I want to sort of look more into the short-term rentals at this point, but I'm not opposed to looking at long-term rentals in the single family sort of sector of the market. But in Puerto Rico, I'm mostly focusing on the short-term aspects of it. And I'm actually kind of torn on how I think becoming a state for Puerto Rico would affect the single family market. I go back and forth on this one. I think on one hand, it could clean up a lot of the things that cause problems for investors, especially from the mainland US and how they're used to doing business. So let's pick out a couple of the aspects of how I think becoming a state for Puerto Rico could affect those. And let's just kind of break out a couple of scenarios, and then we'll kind of get an overall picture of where we think it's going to go. So first, gets right back to the Act 60. If you have less people coming to invest, especially in certain markets, the ones I mentioned before, Dorado, Condado, Palmas del Mar, even Rincon. I didn't mention that the first time. Rincon is a big expat community over there as well. I think those are the markets that are going to be affected by statehood, whether good or bad. That's where the people coming here want to invest that aren't, already Puerto Ricans. So those are the main markets. I'm not in those markets, but those are the markets that are going to have the most effect from the Act 60 disappearing. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? It's definitely not going to bring more people by getting rid of tax incentives. So you could see more demand in the single family markets and all of those. That could actually cause prices to come down. If there's less demand and more inventory, if people do start to leave the island because they're not getting those tax incentives, you're going to see less demand and more inventory, which would bring prices down in the single market family as well. The really big thing that I think would affect real estate in Puerto Rico, and mainly in the single family sector, is tightening up the reins on realtors and real estate agents and the laws affecting how real estate is sold and bought, and just having some control. It's a little bit more of the Wild West out there. You have a lot of people who just say that they're agents. They're not actually realtors, and I don't know if they're licensed, if they're unlicensed. They're just kind of doing whatever they want out there. Everybody has their own contract. They don't have any formalized contracts that they're using, and they're not putting the information into the MLS system because obviously the people who aren't realtors are not part of the multiple listing service. So none of that information is going into the MLS. It's very difficult to find information on comps and how much properties are worth without just hiring an appraiser to go in. And you really would have to spend that money for an appraisal before you write an offer, because you have to know where to write the offer. So this actually scares a lot of investors out of Puerto Rico. If you're not a seasoned investor, this can be really difficult and really intimidating when you're trying to buy property in Puerto Rico. So if they were to become a state and they tightened up these laws and everybody had to follow the same rules they do in the mainland US and be licensed real estate agents with the penalty, it's a felony if you're caught acting as a licensed real estate agent in the US without a license. So if they started to crack down on this, this could get more properties going into the MLS. The data could be better. The comp data could be better. The process could be more like buying in the US, and more US investors might want to come in because prices are low, and it could actually attract more investors to Puerto Rico. So even without the tax incentives, making things more regulated, which I'm usually against regulation and bigger government, but bringing that in this aspect, I could see as an advantage and could bring more investors to Puerto Rico. Another one that's kind of a smaller aspect, I think, are the opportunity zones. I think we all know if Puerto Rico is going to become a state, it's going to be because the Democrats are in power as the president, and they have the House and the Senate, and they can control everything. They have made no qualms about it that they would love to have Puerto Rico become a state and the District of Columbia, because they want to pick up those extra Senate seats because they feel those areas tend to lean to the left. But we also know that if Joe Biden and the left were to take over, that they're not a big fan of the opportunity zones. And Joe Biden has said he wants to get rid of opportunity zones, which is actually something that Trump created. And if you're not familiar with opportunity zones, just a really quick 5-second thing about how they work. You can look on a map, you can Google opportunity zone maps. They're in the US as well in certain areas. So that's based on the median income and median house prices in these opportunity zones. You go in, you buy a house in an opportunity zone. You have to spend 50% of the price of the house on improvement. So you go in, you buy a $50,000 house, you have to put 25 grand into the remodel, or you buy a $100,000 house, you have to put 50 into the remodel. And then you need to hold on to it as a rental. So what they're trying to do is improve houses in lower income neighborhoods. You rent the property after 5 years. you can sell the property with the reduced capital gains. And then after 7, there's another thing. And after 10 years of owning the property, I believe, this is just off the top of my head, I think you can sell the property for 0 capital gains taxes. So it's a way to get into a property and get out of a property without paying taxes on your gains, without having to do a 1031 exchange, which also the Democrats are also saying they would like to get rid of 1031 exchanges, which they've said that before. But anyway, I don't want to digress too far off of this, but that's the nutshell of what an opportunity zone is. So there are people coming in and buying properties in these opportunity zones. I've had some people contact me about opportunity zones in St. Thomas, and we have a lot of opportunity zones on this island as well. They're in Florida, they're everywhere. You can look them up and do some more research on that if you want to find out more. But if opportunity zones go away, it's just one more attraction for outside investors to come in and put money into bad neighborhoods to make them nicer. And I know I'm not going to get into the discussion about gentrification and whether it's good or bad, but it could reduce the amount of investors coming into certain places. Another thing in Puerto Rico, the inheritance laws are kind of wacky. There's a lot of vacant properties in Puerto Rico, and one of the main reasons that Puerto Ricans tell me that there's so many vacant properties is because the inheritance laws are just really wacky. And if you get one person in a huge family that doesn't want to sell the property, they can tie everything up, and then people get tired of it, and then the thing sits there for 10 years and it just gets more dilapidated until nobody cares about it, and they just kind of write it off. And so they couldn't even sell these properties if they wanted to, because they're tied up in these inheritance lawsuits, estates. So if the Puerto Rico became a U.S. state, they could tighten up some of these inheritance laws, make them more similar to mainland USA inheritance laws, which could clean up some of these title issues and these inheritance battles over properties. And it could open up a lot of vacant, dilapidated properties. Is that good? Is that bad? I have no idea. But that's something that could affect. I mean, if you have if you have a decent neighborhood with 5 empty vacant houses because of this issue in it, you might be very happy that this gets cleaned up. Somebody could come in, repair those houses, fix them up, and sell them, rent them, whatever. So that's something that I think could be affected as well. It could boost a lot of inventory if all these houses came onto the market in a short period of time. But I think this is something that still probably would drag out for a while. I don't think you just all of a sudden see a big boost of vacant properties on the market, but it could have an effect. And the last one, I know this video is kind of getting long here, but the last one are title issues. Title issues are a big one in Puerto Rico. I think they've made leaps and bounds of improvement in the last few years from what I'm hearing. They have a new website, and it's actually pretty good. The website has a lot of information. You can go around on there. I bought my house in February. It's December. It still doesn't show on when I look it up on my end of their the CRIM site, it doesn't show that I own the property yet. So I'm actually working with my attorney to help me figure that out. But on top of that, there's lots of places where there's big chunks of lands, like a whole neighborhood with 50 houses on it, that they haven't separated out the parcels for the title, and the government still owns the land, and it's a big mess, and there's leases on the land. And that's really something that's going to need to be ironed out, whether they become a state or not. I don't think they have a lot of motivation to work on that, but there's been 3 different properties that I would have loved to have bought that you don't own the land, and it makes me leery. And previous owners can come back at you when you don't own the land, and they can make title claims, and it's just a little bit of a messy situation. So I think if they become a state and they clear that up, that definitely would be a positive as far as making real estate easier to buy and knowing that you could get a clear title to the property. It could make property taxes go up for some people. Maybe for people who've had a house in the family for generations, and all of a sudden it gets parceled off and now they got to pay higher real estate taxes. That could be a huge negative for those types of people. But as an investor coming in, it could be a big positive, because there's a lot of really cool spots that I wanted to buy houses that I wasn't going to get into that. So that is my thought on what will happen if Puerto Rico becomes a state. I really hope that you found this interesting. If you did, please hit the like button. And please, again, my Puerto Rico videos have over 100,000 views if you probably add them all up. And I only have 2,000 subscribers. So please hit that subscribe button, help the channel out, help me put out more content like this. Leave me comments down below. What do you think will happen if Puerto Rico becomes a state? Just from a real estate point of view, I don't want to get into a whole discussion about whether it's good or the culture or the language or any of those things. Just let's keep this as a real estate conversation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you know things you could teach me something on this. I've delved into this, but I definitely could go deeper. And I'd love to chat with somebody who has some more thoughts on this than me. And if this is something you want me to go into more detail on any of these points I made, let me know. And I'll keep making content. If you keep smashing the like button and you keep subscribing to the channel, thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.